This will be what I hope an interesting conversation. This is Isaiah calling in from Korea. Isaiah, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, how you guys doing?
Hey, Isaiah.
Doing all right, Isaiah. What's
hey,
up?
Yeah, I do got to say that I thought you guys did an amazing job with that last caller. I am a Christian, but these kind of things do cause me some, I guess, cognitive dissonance about my views. And I grew up as like a minister's kid, so I'm well aware of how absolutely traumatizing some of the teachings can be, because it did that to me. But anyway, you guys did a great job of dealing with him.
I appreciate the sentiment there, Isaiah. What is it you wanted to talk to us about?
Yeah, so I'm not a physicist or anything like this. I don't have any great knowledge or insight, but I'm just curious about what you guys would think about. Suppose we were to find out that a multiverse was real. Would you think that that's more likely to exist inside of a God or not God world?
Yeah. So would the multiverse affect the null hypothesis, essentially, that, the null hypothesis being that there isn't a God, right? Like, I don't assert that a God needs to exist in my worldview. He could.
Yeah.
Or it, she, whatever. So does it affect that? Does it change the meter for me? I would say no, because it seems to me, at least the speculation in the physics community, is that there could be a multiverse, and they're coming to that conclusion based on physics, right? So like, there are people smarter than me who went to school for longer than I have, who are looking at string theory, who are looking at cosmology, the study of the origins of the universe, and who are saying, hey, this could be a possibility. And they're coming to that conclusion because they're observing natural laws. They're doing very complicated math problems, and they're figuring this out just based on pure human observation. And so if they're coming to that conclusion just based on that alone, that couldn't convince me of a God in any way, shape, or form, right? Because what credence does that give to the hypothesis that a God started the universe? It doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell me that two gods started the universe, or maybe three or four. It doesn't tell me that an alien could have started. It doesn't say anything about it, right? So it doesn't move the needle for me. And again, that doesn't mean it couldn't be. It doesn't mean that a God could have started everything and created a bunch of universes. It just doesn't lead any credence to it, right? It doesn't push the needle for me. So does that make sense, Isaiah?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And what about
Drew? Do you have any thoughts?
Do you have anything?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with Dan on this one. I really don't see how it's pertinent at all. I don't see any difference that it would make. I mean, if there's a God somehow, somewhere, what does that have to do with a multiverse? I mean, I guess there could be one with or without, if there would be one. I don't see how a multiverse would make it more likely that there would be one or not. Sorry, but I just don't see the relevance. Or also kind of my big question. Now, granted, I'm not a huge philosopher, but my big question with stuff like this, especially when we connect it with a God, is why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why? Yeah, I just don't get it. Sorry, I don't mean that disrespectfully.
Interesting. What are your thoughts?
No. I'm just. Well, I don't know. I am a Christian, so I do have there are a few mixed thoughts on this. But one of them would be, if I could analyze this as a non-believer, I would think, because I was an atheist for about 10 years or so. But if I were to analyze that, it would seem, and this might just be this speaks to personal incredulity or just your own. I understand a large part of this is just what you think is rational, but it would seem something that complex would start to be more in line of, clearly this was like a result of something, some kind of creator. Whether or not you know exactly what that is, like, that doesn't mean that that's Jesus. You know what I mean? It just, for me, that would make deism more plausible, in my opinion. But as a Christian, what causes me the most difficulties and troubles is that if this is the only universe, and we're being judged for our time here on the earth, then a lot of the choices that we make, you kind of talked about this briefly, about the cognitive behavioral therapy, and about how things get programmed into us, and it takes time to change. And so like a lot of the choices we make, a lot of the thought programs have been programmed by our family or society. And so it seems like so unreasonable as a Christian to judge somebody for one lifetime. Like I would find if I could choose myself, like the Buddhist model makes so much more sense, or the Hinduism model where you have multiple tries and reincarnations to try to get things right. You know, the Christianity is just one and done. And then most of the choices you wind up making are from other things, you know. Anyway, that's just my own personal spill.
I have a question for you, if I may.
Okay, Drew's got a question, and then I'll talk after him. Go ahead, Drew. Go ahead, Drew. You got it.
So Isaiah, you had said something about that maybe where the relevance of the multiverse is in terms of whether or not there's a God is that if there's a multiverse that would add to a much greater complexity and therefore be more likely to necessitate an outside force to create it. And so I'm curious at what point is the universe or multiverse, at what point is the complexity so intense that now it's triggered, the mandate of a God creator has been triggered now? Where is that? Is it already there? If it's already there in your view, then what's the difference? Because in my mind, I don't see the need for a God for any of it. Whether it's one universe or many universes, I don't see the need at all. But at what point in your mind is it suddenly required, but it wasn't before?
You know what? I could just speak to my own. If you're talking about me,
yeah, that's all I'm asking. I'm just asking about you and your view. That's all I'm asking about.
Yeah, this is a completely illogical position that I held to. But one day, because I live in South Korea, and I was hiking up some mountains for hours and hours and hours on end, and there were like these giant boulders that, like the size of like Volkswagens. I swear these things are giant. And I went down these things for hours and hours on end. And at some point, you know, the first hour is kind of like exciting. And then you're just kind of like, God, when is this going to end? You know? And it seemed like an eternity I was up there. But in that moment, I didn't become a Christian as a result of that, but just seeing like the vastness of even South Korea. South Korea is a really small country, but seeing how many mountains there were and being on there myself, I personally came to some kind of conclusion that there was something out there. Like I didn't become a Christian till like maybe 6 or 7 years afterwards, but I would just kind of like fall into this deism camp. And I'm like, I don't know what it is. I don't think we could know, but you know, I just personally believe that there's something that was out there, but that's not a rational conclusion. It was just kind of an emotional one, I guess.
Sure. Well, you know, Isaiah, like personal incredulity cuts both ways, right? It cuts both ways.
Sure,
you could make the case and say complexity. I can't believe that this was all just from nothing, right? That there is no driving force behind this, no creative force. It has to be a God. Or I could also say, well, I don't believe out of Christianity, out of all the human religions that have ever existed, is exactly the right one. You know, like you can cut it both ways. One thing I'll point just with your example of observation of nature, right? When you like take a look at something like the Grand Canyon, a lot of people will say, well, man, I just have to know God's real because look at the majesty of this place. And I agree with them in the sense that it's incredible, it's beautiful, and it does something to the human mind that, you know, maybe we don't even fully understand why we have that reaction to it. But at the same time, at least as far as the Grand Canyon goes, we can actually describe how the Grand Canyon was formed through the natural processes that we know exist, right? We know that it was cut through with the Colorado River, I believe, right? Colorado, going through that canyon over thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And we know that it comes with these formations because we have these observations through nature, right? That come to that conclusion. So for the universe, there's a lot of things that we don't know. There's a lot of things that we don't have those observations for, but we've been able to explain a heck of a lot just through natural phenomena alone. And while we may not be able to have the answers to cosmology, the absolute beginnings, I have to make a bet with myself, just like everybody else on this earth, that says, well, what do I think is the best bet? Do I think it has to be something natural, or do I think it has to be something supernatural, infinitely complex? I don't tend to lean towards the deism. I just don't think that the observation that the universe exists itself is going to be enough for me. Now, again, deism is going to be separate from Christianity, right? So I understand people taking more of a deistic view rather than a Christian. When Christian, you get into some very specific ideas about creation, very specific ideas about humanity's place and all that, and relationship with the creator, things like that. So I'm sympathetic to a deistic worldview in the sense that, wow, I can look at the majesty of everything and think, man, there's got to be something to it. But it's mere existence, I don't think can be enough for me. And maybe and so the the question being, well, what is going to be enough for me? To be honest, I'm not sure. Because I am just kind of making a God of the gaps argument, except for nature, right? I'm just saying, well, I think it's just natural forces, but nature time and time again is proving to be able to explain a lot of things that previous religious ideas were just guesses on, really. I mean, what information were they going off of? I mean, to talk about specifically the book of Genesis, I mean, we can take a look at that and see how a lot of the claims in there, if you're taking a literal stance on it, does not match up with our current observations of space and time or the earth or anything. So I don't know, Isaiah, that's all I can tell you there. But I appreciate you calling in and giving us your perspective on it. Any other thoughts you wanted to let us know about?
No, actually, no, because I don't know this topic well enough. I just wanted to get your opinion, but I do have one last question for you, Dan.
Of course.
How is Mila Kunis doing? I'm just kidding. Sorry.
God damn it.
I still think you
God damn it.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Have a good day.
Thanks, Isaiah. Good talking with you.
Thank you.
Listen.
Okay.
I talked to Isaiah before. Let me explain. And he made that joke. He said, how's Mila Kunis doing? And I did not realize he was saying I looked like Ashton Kutcher. But apparently this is a common sentiment amongst people that I resemble Ashton Kutcher. And you know what? You do what you want with that information. I don't know. I don't know if that's me, but
that's not a bad thing.
I guess so. I guess in the pure aesthetics department, that's not the worst.
That's a good looking dude, right? I mean, he's a cool guy.
I think so. So. Yeah. Anyway, it's a interesting talk. I think I've said all I wanted to say on that topic, though. Drew, did you have any follow-up thoughts on that?
I mean, I guess just one sentence, when Isaiah was talking about, sitting up on the mountain or whatnot and the vastness of everything he was looking at, it led him to, eventually to God belief. My primary thought was, rather than the vastness of what he's looking at, more the vastness of what his emotions are doing. What's his emotive response? That's more what it comes to in my mind. The vastness of his emotive response is like, wow, there's this emotional connection. This has to be something more that's less rooted in science or anything objective and more just rooted in the inside stuff that's so easily not necessarily reflective of reality. So that's my
how many people
thought.
will look out and say, oh, well, this must be, I don't know, Zeus that made this. I guess Zeus isn't really the creator type to do that kind of thing. But you know what I'm saying, right? Like even I understand he's talking about the deistic conception, which is different, which attempts to be a bit more objective than any specific Christian idea. But I would still argue that like our concept of the deistic God is still like very much based on Western concepts and ideas of like creator beings and gods. Like when people are talking about a creator, they're talking about somebody with intention, right? Like they're talking about, I don't know. There's a person, a human almost element to that wouldn't really make sense outside of, I don't know, human beings talking about that idea. I don't know. There's another thought there.
I mean, I think I want to say that the vast majority of deists, and maybe I'm speaking from the background from which I come, so it might not be true, but I want to say that the vast majority of deists, historically speaking, and of deistic movements have been offshoots or those who were former Christians, formerly of a Christian influence. And so they're taking a Christian concept and applying it in different ways. And so it's still going to carry those embedded features within it.
It's true. Yeah. Look at the Freemasons, man. They say they're about deism, but they're all Christians. I'm not going to dunk on the Freemasons today. I'll let them be.